that could be set from the Grimmsnarl.
Well, let's jump into it. Round 3 is underway, and Grimmsnarl's front and center with that Calyrex Ice Rider paired up on the opposing side with that Zamazenta and the Chien-Pao. Sword of Ruin on the field as one as well, synergizing Calyrex with that Glastria.
Yeah, and we're seeing the Grimmsnarl immediately to get those screens potentially. And when I say screens, it's Reflect. It's going to be Reflect against the Chien-Pao and the Zamazenta for sure. But then that's one of the nice things about the Chien-Pao, because usually you just have the offensive moves and can't really do much through the screens. But Ruination doesn't care about the screens in the slightest. It will always do half damage, even if the screens are up. And that could be a nice way of bypassing this Grimmsnarl, allowing such bulk available on the Calyrex. I would still expect the Calyrex to be able to survive the attack, even if it is Ruination and a follow-up body press into that Calyrex. It can't defensively Terrasilize into Fairy, which you see very commonly, and that's why we're not seeing a Terrasalization at all.
Well, there it is, the Reflect indeed in the face of these two physical attackers, followed up by the Ruination. That's going to come through into the Calyrex, as you said, Jamie, bypassing anything that Reflect is trying to do. Looks like the Heavy Slam coming through, however, is significant into the Grimmsnarl, meaning that Reflect was also significant in keeping it in the game. Leech Seed will come through, start trying to get a little bit of HP recovery back on that Calyrex in combination with its leftovers.
Yeah, and it's actually going to be quite impactful recovery, which it should be able to go through on the second turn as well. You can even get a cheeky Thunder Wave onto this Zamazenta, given that the Grimmsnarl was able to survive. Even with the Sword of Ruin helping, that Reflect, allowing that Grimmsnarl to survive. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what that Grimmsnarl has been trained to achieve here, and allows that little bit of a Thunder Wave. And your Calyrex, it's going to be the Trick Room variety, and it's probably not going to outspeed the Zamazenta on the Chien-Pao, even if you get Thunder Wave, but you might as well get something like the full Paralysis potential in the future. And then, yeah, the Chien-Pao can still go for Ruination into the Calyrex, and that shouldn't put it into body press range, factoring in the Sword of Ruin and the Reflect. But no, it's actually just going to be Ice Shard. Doesn't want to deal with those Thunder Waves. That's going to out-prioritize that Prankster from the Grimmsnarl.
Yeah, the priority coming in clutch there for the Chien-Pao, getting rid of the Grimmsnarl from play as Zamazenta can follow up with a body press into that Calyrex.
Oh.
Critical hit comes through. Giovanni puts his hands up, says that's the game, and is able to get a double KO on this turn. Giovanni in a commanding position.
I mean, you say that's the game we play, that might just be game immediately. This first game. Yeah, Farigiraf going to join the field. It's going to be Miraidon as well, of course. But yeah, that Calyrex was set up very, very nicely there behind the Reflect. Almost certainly going to get a second Leech Seed on the Chien-Pao, maybe get a Trick Room up, and then get the Leech Seed afterwards. But yeah, that is one of the downsides of running a screens team. The more and more turns that are available, the more and more chances build up for a critical hit. And usually, your team is very, very bulky behind the screens, but if that crit breaks through, then it really breaks through and disrupts the strategy, and we saw that immediately here.
I mean, the defensive capabilities of this Farigiraf are very interesting right now as well. It's behind the Reflect, and it's got the Electric Seed boost. The issue is, even if it does stay on the field, it's got to be able to get through an onslaught of 4 Pokemon on Giovanni's side. Miraidon, however, I think one of the best Pokemon to try and help it out in that regard.
Yeah, that's where all the damage has got to come for now. We'll have to see who's going to be faster between the Miraidon and the Farigiraf. I wouldn't be surprised if the Miraidon on Andrea's side is built slower and bulkier to benefit from the screens, again, compounding with those screens, potentially. And defensive Terrasalization coming here makes absolutely perfect sense, even if this isn't going to be Dazzling Gleam, which it probably shouldn't be, given that you can just go for Wide Guard in the future if that is. Defensively against the potential Ice Spinner coming out could be quite useful here.
Yes, helps it out against a potential body press as well coming through. But as you mentioned, it is choice spec, so it's going to be locked into whatever it chooses. Dazzling Gleam, not going to be a wise option. Ruination coming through, doing 50%, and it is indeed the Draco Meteor. Also a bold choice, because this is going to be lowering its special attack harshly after every turn. Farigiraf, however, goes for the Trick Room here, wanting to try and get the speed on its side, so that maybe Farigiraf has a time to shine. Yeah,
and now it's very, very limited offense going to be coming out from this Miraidon. Where even is the damage into the Zamazenta now? Like, Psychic Noise is going to do, like, a little bit of a tickle, and Draco Meteor is going to be resisted. So, yeah, I guess because you've got the Leech Seed on the Zamazenta, it might just start to add up and help this Miraidon. Because, yeah, it took the Ruination. Actually, it's got reasonably healthy now, but I think that the Electro Drift would have probably been preferable. But then if there was Electro Drift, that's what the Terra Ground on the Chien-Pao was for, right?
Yeah, maybe worrying about that Terra Ground, so didn't want to lock into the electric type attack, but maybe the Farigiraf could then have dealt with it. We're just going to see the Heavy Slam come through into that Fairy type, putting it down into the red as another Draco Meteor comes through. This, of course, will be enough to be able to deal with that Chien-Pao and remove it from play, but Miraidon now at -4 special attack. It's going to be in a really dangerous spot.
Yeah, it will be for sure. There's just not going to be the damage anymore coming out from Andrea's side of the field. Yeah, the Leech Seed is still active and is still helping out this Miraidon, but based on the damage that Heavy Slam did previously, well, to be fair, it was Sword of Ruin boosted Heavy Slam, so maybe it's not going to KO. However, a Raging Bolt's coming in Trick Room is definitely going to just underspeed this Miraidon. That's going to be a very, very safe Thunderbolt into the Miraidon. It's in range, guaranteed, and then there's just going to be no offense coming out from this Frigoraph anymore.
Yeah, Frigoraph can do many things, supportive, setting up the Trick Room, being, great with blocking priority, but it's just not got enough in the tank to be able to get the damage on the board. So, Andrea locking in the forfeit. Giovanni takes game 1, thanks to a very dominant start at the beginning of that match.
But that critical hit was very, very crucial, right?
Yeah.
The Calyrex Ice Rider would have been able to survive the combination of attacks that was going into it. Though the body press would have done some pretty good damage, but it would done nowhere near enough to be able to KO. And then almost certainly got either a Leech Seed or a Trick Room. Both would have been very, very useful. And then the Calyrex Ice Rider would have been pretty much set up for success. If you get 2 Leech Seeds on the opponent, well then suddenly you're recovering a huge amount of HP, especially paired with the leftovers as well. So I think the advantage would have surely still been on Andrea's side, but a very, very nicely timed critical hit coming out for Giovanni.
But ultimately, this is why we play a best-of-3 set. And I mean, the analysis coming into this game, Jamie, you were looking at Andrea and kind of saying there's an advantage here, there's bulk, there's longevity on the field. And yes, game 1 doesn't go your way, but then coming into game 2, you still have that advantage, possibly from like a team preview perspective. Secondly, you've gained a little bit more information from Giovanni's side, and you can adapt accordingly. So the game is definitely not over yet, as long as Andrea can stay composed and focused going into this next match.
Yeah, this is an example of a game where the loser doesn't really need to adapt. The strategy was entirely sound and just a little bit of a misfortune on that second turn. And if that doesn't happen, well then surely the Calyrex is still set up for a lot of success. So I wouldn't be surprised if, even though Andrea lost this first game, still goes with exactly the same strategy. I think going with the screens makes perfect sense against this. Like we mentioned, Giovanni's team likes to just be able to pick up very, very quick KOs, and when it usually can't, it just goes for Ruination, and then picks up a KO because now you're only at half HP. But then a Pokemon as bulky as Ice Rider behind a Reflect would still be able to survive a body press even after a Ruination.
Well, let's see how game 2 is going to unravel. It's once again that Calyrex and the Grimmsnarl refreshed and ready for action with both the restricted out here for Giovanni. The Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and Zamazenta front and center here in Swiss round 3.
Yeah, I quite like this as a mix-up for Giovanni because you can set a screen, but you can't set a screen for both the Zamazenta and the Calyrex on the same turn. Whereas against the Champion, the Zamazenta, well, obviously it was going to be Reflect. But now you've got to choose. Do you want to get the light screen going? Well, then you still probably need to terastallize your Calyrex into the water type so it's not taking as much damage from Astral Barrage. Or do you want the Reflect so that you'll survive the Heavy Slam? Because the Grimmsnarl will drop to a Heavy Slam if you don't click Reflect. We saw that the damage from the Sword of Ruin boosted. Reflect does a little bit more damage reduction than the Sword of Ruin does offensive. So it will be in range, and therefore you need the Reflect to be able to survive with the Grimmsnarl to get a screen in the future. Or if you go for the light screen with to help the Calyrex from the Shadow Rider, well then now you're going to lose your Grimmsnarl. So there's a little bit of an awkward choice here for Andrea, but I think the terastallization to the water type surely implies that you're just going to go for Reflect, keep the Grimmsnarl, and then be able to bulk it out because you're now not weak to that Astral Barrage.
Yeah, really trying to keep things safe onto this Calyrex. Up goes the Reflect once again from that Grimmsnarl as the Astral Barrage will fly across the stage. Will connect on both of Andrea's Pokemon. Do a respectable amount of damage, about 1/4 and 1/3 across the board there. As the Heavy Slam follows up, that will be able to get the KO. Grimmsnarl is down with that critical hit coming through.
Another.
This Zamazenta is on a rampage, but critically, as you said, the Reflect is up, the terastallization is there. Calyrex is now able to go for this Leech Seed and start getting up that recovery. So as long as it can stay out of the way of any potential critical hits, it looks like Andrea is in a good position with a free switch in here as well.
Yeah, I think that the Grimmsnarl would still have been KO'd to the Heavy Slam even if there wasn't a critical hit, mainly because the Astral Barrage helped with a bit of chip damage, and therefore the Grimmsnarl was only afforded one screen here. But to be fair, there's only really going to be the Calyrex as the potential special attacker. I guess the Raging Bolt could be as well because that did come to the game, but Reflect going to be able to reduce the damage from the Zamazenta very, very nicely. And the Calyrex hasn't really taken too much damage. You can see the impact of the defensive terastallization here. Here comes the Miraidon as well to be able to threaten absolutely massive damage into the opposing Calyrex and Zamazenta. It could very easily just be a Volt Switch and a Glacial Lance KO into the opposing Calyrex, but then you could go for White Guard with your Zamazenta, but then you're not doing anything with your Zamazenta that turn. And it could have just been a Leech Seed into the Calyrex as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Leech Seed into that Calyrex, because based on the damage that Astral Barrage is doing, you'd be able to recover most of that if you've got 2 Leech Seeds going. and there's really not much damage potential into this Miraidon at the moment. We still have to see if the Miraidon is incredibly slow because it wants to benefit from the screens, because that means the Zamazenta could outspeed it, and I don't think we've seen that interaction perfectly just yet. So we'll have to... I know, the Dragometer did go before the Zamazenta in the previous game, so actually, it's going to go before the Zamazenta, because Zamazenta's not even moving this turn. It is switching out instead, and there's the Amoonguss.
Yeah, Amoonguss going to join the fray as well, going to be able to eat up electric type attacks much better, as Calyrex actually just goes straight for the encore. Says no Glacial Lance today. I want to bring the Amoonguss in nice and safely. You are locked into that Leech Seed, and Leech Seed, yes, it might go down into the Calyrex, but Amoonguss isn't going to worry about that at all. It still takes a respectable amount of damage from that Volt Switch, but it's a nice pivot off the field for Andrea here, locking in some damage on the board, but being able to bring in that third, or I guess fourth Pokemon in the back, and it's going to be the Iron Hands. There it is, Jamie.
Yeah, no Farigiraf coming out for Andrea on this turn. And is Leech Seed going to target into the Amoonguss? It did, so that was probably going to be either a Glacial Lance or Trick Room, because if it was Leech Seed, you would have surely been targeting the Shadow Rider and then would have still hit it, but then that was the 50-50 chance, and it hit the Amoonguss instead. So no extra recovery coming out for the Calyrex here, and also not breaking the Focus Sash on the Calyrex, because the Leech Seed would have also been able to achieve that. And then with the Electric Terrain boost and the Quark Drive boost, Wild Charge would threaten the KO into the Calyrex. But there's not really a reason here for us to see no Rage Powder coming out from the Amoonguss, because you do want to be keeping this Calyrex safe, especially because it wants to be doing even more damage now it's using its Ghost-type Terrestrialization.
Some beautiful control exhibited by Giovanni there, bringing in that Amoonguss. The Fake Out is going to come down into that slot, being a Ghost-type. We know that Calyrex Shadow Rider was going to be not taking that damage at all, as Calyrex now can go for this Astral Barrage, boosted up by the Ghost Terrestrialization as well. It is on an all-out offensive approach here, targeting down into both of Andrea's Pokemon, taking them down into that orange zone.
Yeah, no Light Screen means that's a really, really good amount of damage. The Leech Seed now connecting with the Calyrex is going to put that Calyrex out of Astral Barrage range, but that Iron Hands is looking pretty close, and it's definitely in range of Psychic as well, based on the damage that it's taken. And we could very easily see that, because it can't protect, and if it switches that into Miraidon, that's still going to be taking a huge amount of damage on the way in. So yeah, especially because this Calyrex is locked into Leech Seed, now it just can't do anything on this turn. You can't Leech Seed a Pokemon you've already Leech Seed, and you can't Leech Seed the Amoonguss because it's a Grass type. So yeah, I think that Giovanni is still absolutely in the driving seat here.
And I also like the Fake Out, though, from Andrea there, knowing that the Rage Powder was potentially coming through to try and distract from that Leech Seed coming through, but instead shutting that down, getting that Leech Seed, breaking the Focus Sash onto that Calyrex in prime position. Miraidon going to switch in, however, now bringing that Hadron Engine back online as Amoonguss jumps out for Giovanni.
Yeah, and that could have been a Leech Seed into that slot, and that would have actually started some recovery going quite nicely, but Raging Bolt joining the field instead of that Amoonguss, getting that Regenerator, also getting that special attack boost with the Booster Energy. That's going to be a lot of damage coming out.
It certainly is, and Calyrex going to switch things up with this Psychic as well, targeting just down into the Iron Hands, wanting to remove it from play entirely. That is a Nulla KO coming through. Andrea down to just 2 remaining Pokemon. It's going to be both the Restrictors coming through, and you have to deal with this Calyrex that's not only Terrestrialized, but also has this Grenade boost.
Yeah, and there's no Light Screen, so it's just going to be able to do a huge amount of damage here. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if the Calyrex is in range of that Astral Barrage, because based on the previous Astral Barrage at neutral, it did just about half, and that looks like it's under 75% to me on the Calyrex. The Miraidon should be able to survive at full HP, but then the Raging Bolt would be able to finish up with a KO, and even if it doesn't, then the Zamazenta and the Amoonguss can do it in the future, because this is just going to be an Astral Barrage for sure. Yeah. You got to protect your Calyrex almost certainly to try and KO the Calyrex, because it has been Leech Seeded, its Sash is broken, and then maybe you're able to sweep through with Miraidon and Calyrex afterwards.
And I let this protect on the Raging Bolt, keeping it safe so it can Thunderclap and clean up whatever the Calyrex leaves for it to deal with. As the Astral Barrage does come through, it's going to connect on both Pokemon. That's a KO on the Calyrex. Miraidon now in that red zone. Even though Miraidon's going to be able to get some damage off in this next turn, the priority Thunderclap coming through that will be inevitably boosted up by that Electric Terrain is going to be formidable.
Yeah, that's just going to be the game here for Giovanni. It is going to be the Draco Meteor. Again, not Electro Drift, but I don't think it particularly matters at this point. Yes, you've been able to take care of this Calyrex, but look how low that Miraidon is. And Giovanni has 3 Pokemon remaining, and all 3 of them can just pick up the KO on that Miraidon. So we're just going to go through the motions for this last turn. We could even have seen the Amoonguss get the Sludge Bomb KO, because that would have been in range as well. But yeah, it's just going to be a double attack here and the game for Giovanni.
Yeah, battle is cancelled. Giovanni Piscitelli is able to take a commanding 2-0 victory.
Being able to break through the incredible bulk